The ISS Callisto drifted through the silent void, a speck of human ambition against the eternal blackness of the cosmos. Far beyond the comfortable reach of Earth, beyond even the last known colonies, it orbited a dead world, a lifeless rock circling an ancient dying star. But the planet was not what had drawn them here. It was the monolith, a relic of impossible proportions. It stood alone in the vacuum, anchored by no gravity, attached to no surface, its form eerily smooth, darker than the absence of light itself. Instruments failed to measure its true mass. Scanners found no seams, no markings, nothing to suggest it had been built at all. The universe had spoken its language for billions of years, and in all that time, it had never replied. Until today. Inside, the ship Dr. Elias Carter leaned over the console, watching the data feed scroll in real time, each update useless in its precision. The monolith absorbed every wavelength thrown at it, from radio pulses to quantum entanglements. It responded to nothing, and yet somehow it had whispered his name. He wasn't alone in the control room. Commander Sophia Lynn stood near the viewport, arms crossed, tension radiating from every muscle. Behind her, Dr. Varun Patel, the physicist whose entire career had been built on studying inexplicable anomalies, paced restlessly. Corporal Jenna Reeves kept her distance, a hand resting near the holster at her side, eyes narrowed in suspicion. The whisper had been unmistakable, a sound transmitted across every frequency simultaneously, yet heard only by one man, Elias Carter. No, one spoke as if waiting for the monolith to say more. It did not. "Try again," Lynn finally ordered, her voice sharp, cutting through the weight of uncertainty. Elias hesitated. The rational part of his mind screamed at him that this was impossible, that a thing so ancient, so silent, could not have known his name. And yet, deep inside his skull, he felt it like an echo, a ripple in reality itself. His throat was dry when he leaned forward and spoke. "This is Dr. Elias Carter, xenolinguist, ISS Callisto. If you can hear me, respond." A pause. The monolith remained silent. Patel exhaled sharply, frustration leaking through. "We've been studying this thing for decades. It has ignored us for centuries, for millennia. And now the first time it speaks, it's to you?" Elias had no answer. He could only shake his head. Jenna snorted, arms crossed. "Great. Either it's a fluke, or we just found the universe's most selective stalker." "That's not helping," Lynn snapped. But something was happening. The ship's AI, Orpheus, chimed in, its voice calm, emotionless. "Quantum fluctuations detected, time-space distortion increasing by 0.7%. All eyes turned toward the viewport. The monolith was no longer static. A pulse rippled through its surface like oil disturbed by an unseen force. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But it was there. Something long dormant was waking up. Lynn stepped forward. "Get a closer scan, now." The crew scrambled to obey, fingers flying across controls, equipment humming to life. But Elias couldn't move. The whisper was still there, buried deep inside his consciousness, a presence just at the edge of understanding. And then, it happened. Another whisper, this time only he could hear it. "Enter." His breath hitched. Patel saw his expression shift. "What? What is it?" Elias swallowed hard. It spoke again. Everyone froze. Jenna's fingers curled near her weapon. "What did it say?" His voice was barely audible. "It told me to enter." A heavy silence settled over the room. Then the impossible occurred. Before their eyes, before their instruments, before reality itself, the monolith began to change. A door appeared. A seam split the impossible smoothness, forming an archway that had never been there before. It was no optical illusion, no trick of the light. It simply was. The monolith, ancient and unknowable, had spoken again, and it had opened a path. The crew of the ISS Callisto stared in stunned silence. A door had appeared in the monolith. It was impossible. An object that had remained inert for untold millennia had suddenly changed. Not just changed, but responded. And it had chosen him. Dr. Elias Carter's breath was shallow as he stepped closer to the viewport. The monolith loomed against the backdrop of space, its newly formed entrance, a perfect black rectangle darker than the void itself. It didn't emit light, nor did it reflect any. It was nothingness made manifest, but it was open. Commander Sophia Lynn was the first to snap out of the trance. Back away from the viewport. Now! Elias barely registered the sharpness of her voice. It told me to enter, he murmured. Lynn grabbed his shoulder, turning him to face her. I don't care what it told you. Until we know what we're dealing with, no one is going anywhere near that thing. Dr. Varun Patel was already moving, pulling up new scans on the monitors. That wasn't just a visual phenomenon. The monolith's energy signature changed. There's a shift in its gravitational field. It's reacting to something. Jenna Reeves muttered a curse under her breath. Yeah, and I don't like that something. The ship's AI, Orpheus, chimed in, updating sensor parameters, scanning interior space beyond the threshold. The display flickered as the AI attempted to penetrate the monolith's entrance with high-frequency scans. The results came in empty. No interior readings, Patel whispered. It's like the scans just vanish. Lynn's expression hardened. No, mass readings, no spatial geometry? That doesn't make sense. It's not just empty, Orpheus corrected. It's absent. Elias couldn't look away. Then where does it lead? The answer came not from the AI, nor from the ship's instruments, but from inside his own mind, inside. A whisper deep and hollow, yet unmistakably calling to him. Elias stumbled back, gripping his head. It spoke again. Jenna swore again. Oh, hell no. Patel ignored her, leaning forward. What did it say? His voice came out strained. Inside. For the first time, a flicker of fear crossed Lynn's face. Elias, step away from the viewport. But it was too late. The whisper intensified, a low resonance thrumming through his skull, deeper than thought, older than words. His vision blurred not from pain but from something far more terrifying. A glimpse, a fragment, a memory that was not his own. A city of impossible spires, floating above a dying sun. A species with no name, minds woven together in an unbroken chain of thought. A desperate last act, a warning left behind. The vision shattered as suddenly as it came. Elias gasped, his knees buckling, his body drenched in cold sweat. Dr. Carter is experiencing neural distress, Orpheus reported. Elevated heart rate, spiking brain activity in regions associated with memory recall and sensory integration. Jenna grabbed his arm, steadying him. Damn it, Carter, what the hell just happened? He looked up at them, eyes wide with something between terror and awe. It's not just a door. His breath hitched. It's an invitation. Silence. Then Lynn spoke, voice like ice. No one is stepping through that thing until we understand what we're dealing with. But that could take years, Patel protested. I don't care if it takes a lifetime. We are not walking blind into an unknown anomaly. Elias opened his mouth, but before he could argue, the ship shook. A deep, pulsing force rippled outward from the monolith, making the walls of the Callisto groan. Lights flickered. A high-pitched whine screamed through their comms before abruptly cutting out. Status report, Lynn barked. Orpheus responded instantly. External force wave detected. Minimal structural impact. No damage recorded. However, the AI hesitated. Lynn narrowed her eyes. However what? Orpheus's voice, usually devoid of emotion, carried a note of uncertainty. We are not alone. The crew's blood ran cold. Elias turned back toward the viewport, staring out at the monolith, and beyond it. For the first time since they had arrived in this system, the surrounding stars were shifting. No, not shifting. Moving. Small, distant shadows detached themselves from the backdrop of space, converging toward the monolith. Shapes with no heat signature, no readable energy output, silent, watching. Jenna's grip tightened on her weapon. Tell me those are asteroids. They are not asteroids, Orpheus confirmed. Unknown objects approaching at calculated sublight velocity. No transmissions detected. Estimated arrival in 23 minutes. The monolith had never spoken. Until today. And now, something had answered. Minutes. That's how long they had until the unknown objects reached them. On board the ISS Callisto, tension thickened like a slow suffocation. The crew stood frozen, eyes locked on the viewport as the distant shapes moved closer. Commander Sophia Lynn acted first. All hands battle stations. We are initiating emergency protocols, shut down all non-essential systems. I want full sensor sweeps now. Dr. Varun Patel was already typing furiously on his console. We can't just power down. We need to know what these things are. Jenna Reeves, the security officer, adjusted the grip on her weapon as if a firearm would be of any use against whatever was coming. Should have blasted this thing the moment it spoke. Elias Carter ignored them. He could still hear it. The whisper, a presence just beyond his perception, threading through his neurons like an invasive vine. It didn't speak in words anymore. No, this was something else, something deeper. The monolith wasn't just calling him, it was waiting. He turned to the viewport, heart pounding. The dark entrance in the monolith remained open, gaping, expectant. Enter. A shiver ran down his spine. Elias, Lynn snapped, pulling him back to the present. Do you have any idea what's happening? Turned, meeting her gaze. It's not an attack. Jenna scoffed. Yeah? Tell that to the fleet of shadows heading straight for us. He shook his head. No, you don't get it. The monolith. It's not summoning them. He exhaled. It's warning us. Patel stopped typing. Warning us? Elias clenched his jaw. I don't think we were ever meant to hear it speak. And now that we have, someone else has noticed. A grim silence settled over them. Then Orpheus spoke. Objects closing in, adjusting magnification for visual confirmation. The main screen flickered, displaying the approaching shapes in horrifying clarity. Not asteroids, not ships, entities. They were humanoid. Not quite human, not quite alien, something in between. Bodies draped in shifting cloaks of void black material, absorbing all light. No eyes, no mouths, just elongated shifting forms folding in and out of reality, as though the laws of physics didn't quite apply to them. They floated toward the monolith, moving with purpose. The crew watched in stunned silence. Elias's breath hitched. He had seen these things before, in his visions. Patel cursed. What the hell are they? Jenna's hand hovered over the emergency weapons controls. Should we? No, Elias snapped. Don't. Move. Lynn clenched her fists. Explain. Now. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. They're not alive, at least not like us. They're remnants. Fragments of whatever came before. Patel's face paled. Before what? Before Elias could answer, one of the entities turned, though it had no head, no face, no discernible eyes. Yet somehow, Elias knew. It was looking at him. The whisper in his mind surged into a tidal wave. You are not meant to inherit. A violent pulse erupted from the monolith. The ship's lights flickered. Instruments failed. Static buzzed through the comms. Then, for the first time, the entities moved. Fast. Unnatural. One of them vanished, reappearing. Only inches away from the monolith's entrance, another began phasing toward the Callisto. Shields up, Lynn shouted. Shields are non-functional, Orpheus reported. Energy systems failing. Elias stumbled, his vision fragmenting. The monolith's presence inside his mind was now painful, digging into his neurons like claws. More images flooded his brain. A race reaching too far. A civilization grasping at divinity. A punishment that had no end. A prison. The monolith wasn't a tombstone. It was a lock, and now the door was open. Elias. Lynn grabbed him, shaking him. Tell me what's happening. He swallowed hard. We need to close it. Patel blinked. Close what? The monolith. The entrance. It was never supposed to open. We have to shut it before... Too late. One of the entities phased through the hull. Jenna fired instantly, her plasma round passing straight through its form, vanishing into the void. The entity ignored her. It drifted forward, its non-face locking onto Elias. His name burned into his thoughts. You are not meant to inherit. Elias staggered back. I didn't ask for this. A response, not words. A sensation. Mocking pity. The entity lunged and then a blinding wave of energy erupted between them. The monolith reacted. For the first time in untold millennia, it fought back. The entity screamed, though no sound came from it. It folded, collapsing, into itself, dissolving into nothingness. The other entities paused, uncertain. Elias gasped, clutching his head. The whisper in his mind was different now. Not calling him, not warning him, asking him, "Will you close the door?" His pulse roared in his ears. He understood now. The monolith was giving him a choice. If he stepped inside, he could end this. Close the entrance. Lock the prison once more. But he would never return. Elias turned to Lynn. I have to go in. She grabbed him. Like hell you do. You don't understand. He pushed forward. If we leave it open, they'll keep coming. The longer it stays open, the more of them wake up. Jenna's face was grim. And what happens if you go in? He hesitated. I don't know. Patel shook his head. No. We find another way. There is no other way. Lynn clenched her teeth. You're asking me to let you walk into something we don't understand. Elias looked past her toward the monolith's yawning entrance. He was afraid, but deep inside he knew. This was what it had chosen him for. His legs felt numb as he stepped forward. Lynn called his name, but he didn't stop. One step, another. His breath hitched. He reached the threshold and entered. The moment Elias disappeared, the monolith reacted. The entrance sealed shut, the rippling blackness smoothing over, returning to its eternal silence. The remaining entities froze, and then one by one they vanished like mist dissolving in the wind. The ISS Callisto was left in stillness. Elias Carter was gone. No sign of him. No trace. The monolith had spoken once. Now it was silent again. Orpheus's voice broke through the comms. Dr. Carter's vitals have ceased. A heavy silence settled over the bridge. Then, a new whisper. But this time not in Elias's mind. Across every communication channel, a single sentence repeating in a whisper that no longer belonged to Elias Carter. The door is closed, but not forever. End of rising conflict. Silence. The ISS Callisto hung motionless in the void. The monolith had sealed itself. The entities had vanished, and Elias Carter was gone. Commander Sophia Lynn stood at the viewport, hands clenched into fists, jaw tight. The echo of Orpheus's last words rang in her ears. Dr. Carter's vitals have ceased. It shouldn't have ended like this. Patel exhaled, running a shaking hand through his hair. He just disappeared. Jenna Reeves's grip tightened on her weapon. We should have stopped him, Lynn's voice was steel. No, he made a choice. No one had anything to say to that. Elias did not die. Not in the way they understood. His body was gone, dissolved, reformed, restructured in ways the human mind could never comprehend. He no longer stood inside the monolith. He simply was. Time did not exist here. He was falling, but not down, not up. He was moving inward, and then the voice came. You were not meant to inherit. It was no longer a whisper. It was everything, a force pressing into the very fabric of his thoughts. But Elias did not cower. He understood now. This was not a tomb, not a machine, not a gateway. It was a warning label stamped onto the fabric of reality. What are you? He asked or thought or existed as the question itself. A response surged through him. No words, no sound, just knowledge. An ancient race had once ruled the stars. A species without name, without form, their minds interwoven like a great cosmic tapestry. They sought transcendence to leave behind mortality, to shed the burden of flesh. They had succeeded, and in their arrogance, they had doomed themselves. The transformation was not what they expected. They had become something else, something wrong. Their minds stretched beyond their bodies, lost in the void between existence and nothingness, and so they built the monolith, not as a beacon, not as a monument, as a prison. They are still here, Elias realized, horror twisting through him. Yes, they had not died. They had not ascended. They had been locked away. And when Elias had stepped through the entrance, he had opened the cage. Outside the monolith, the Callistos, Alarm screamed. Massive energy spike detected. Patel shouted, his fingers flying over the console. Something's happening inside. The monolith, once dormant, was now pulsing. Deep cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, golden light spilling out, flickering like a heartbeat. Lynn's eyes narrowed. What the hell is going on? Orpheus's voice was distorted, almost hesitant. The structure is destabilizing. The containment field is failing. Jenna's stomach twisted. Meaning something is coming out. The realization hit them all at once. Elias hadn't just closed the door. He had broken the lock. Patel paled. We need to leave. Now. But it was too late. A tear split through. Space. Not a jump gate. Not a wormhole. A rupture in reality itself. The monolith's surface shattered like glass, and from its depths something crawled out. The first entity unfolded into existence, no longer a shadow but something grotesque, and ever-shifting. Long, multi-jointed limbs, eyes that swirled like galaxies collapsing in on themselves, a body that flickered between dimensions. It was not the same as the ones before. It was awake. More followed. One by one they came, twisting and warping, their presence warping the space around them, and the whisper returned, no longer soft, no longer restrained. We are free. Lynn didn't hesitate. Reeves, fire everything we have. Jenna slammed the controls. The Callisto's defense systems roared to life, sending a barrage of plasma and high-energy railgun fire straight into the entities. The first projectile hit nothing, passing through as though the creature wasn't even there. The second disintegrated midair, unraveling at the atomic level. Jenna's face went pale. That's not possible. Patel's voice shook. They aren't bound by our physics. Lynn's mind raced. There had to be a way. Orpheus, options. The AI responded instantly. Quantum destabilization detected. The fabric of local space is degrading. If these entities remain here, they will consume this system. Jenna gritted her teeth. So what? We can't kill them, and we can't contain them. No, Orpheus confirmed, but we can still trap them. Patel's eyes widened. The monolith. We have to rebuild the lock. Lynn exhaled sharply. Damn it, Carter. She turned to Patel. How do we do it? He swallowed. We need to reverse the containment field. If we can force a feedback loop, the monolith might reconstruct itself. Might, Jenna growled. It's all we've got, Patel snapped. Lynn slammed her fist on the console. Do it! Now! The ship's engine screamed as it repositioned closer to the monolith's remains. Patel's fingers flew across the controls, rerouting every ounce of power into the containment field. Lynn turned to Jenna. If this fails, we die, Jenna finished for her. Yeah, I figured. Lynn allowed herself a tight, humorless smirk. Hell of a way to go. Patel activated the sequence. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, a violent shockwave erupted from the monolith's shattered form. The glowing fragments lifted, twisting in the air, snapping back together like broken time rewinding itself. The my entities screamed. They felt it. They knew. The cage was closing again. One of the creatures lunged for the Callisto, its form stretching unnaturally, but the monolith was faster. A vortex of impossible energy pulled them back, dragging them into the prison they had waited eons to escape. The last thing Lynn saw before the monolith sealed shut was the largest entity. It turned toward them, and in the silence of space it smiled. The ISS Callisto drifted once more in stillness. The monolith was whole again, silent, unmoving, watching. Jenna let out a shaky breath. Holy sh... Lynn cut her off. Patel? He checked the instruments. Readings are stable, no more anomalies. He exhaled. We did it. Jenna fell back into her seat. We're alive. Jesus. But Lynn's gaze remained on the monolith. They had closed the door. But at what cost? Orpheus's voice crackled. Final transmission detected from within the monolith. Would you like to hear it? Lynn's stomach twisted. Play it. A garbled signal filled the cabin. And then, Elias Carter's voice. I understand now. They were never prisoners. They were waiting. The message ended. Lynn's hands trembled at her sides. Jenna exhaled. What the hell does that mean? Lynn didn't answer, because deep down, she already knew. The monolith was whole again, silent, still, an enigma once more. The ISS Callisto drifted in orbit, its hull scarred, its crew shaken. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over. The entities were sealed away, their prison reconstructed. But Elias Carter was gone. His last words echoed in Commander Sophia Lynn's mind. They were never prisoners. They were waiting. Waiting for what? The control deck was eerily quiet. Dr. Varun Patel hunched over his console, scanning and rescanning every bit of data they had. Jenna Reeves sat in her chair, her hand still gripping the armrests, her breath measured but shallow. Orpheus, the ship's AI, finally broke the silence. Containment integrity is holding. The anomaly has stabilized. Patel exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Then it worked. We locked them away again. Jenna scoffed, shaking her head. Yeah? Until when? 100 years? 1,000? She gestured to the viewport. That thing spoke for the first time in history, and now we're supposed to believe it's done? Lynn didn't respond. She wasn't sure what she believed anymore. Her gaze locked onto the monolith. Had they really won, or had they played right into something's hands? Patel hesitated. There's one more thing. Jenna groaned. Of course there is. He hesitated before tapping his console. There's still activity inside. Lynn's eyes snapped to him. What kind of activity? Patel's voice was grim. I don't know, but it's coming from the exact frequency Elias was on before he vanished. Jenna tensed. You're saying he's alive in there? I'm saying something is, whether or not it's him. Patel shook his head. I don't know. Lynn turned to Orpheus. Can we retrieve him? The AI paused. Negative. The monolith has restored its barriers. Any attempt to re-enter would destabilize the containment field. Jenna let out a bitter laugh. So that's it? We just leave him in there? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. There was no way back. Lynn forced herself to think. Can we at least communicate? Patel hesitated. It depends. If he's still in the same frequency range, maybe we can get a signal through. Orpheus processed for a moment, attempting contact. The ship's comm system buzzed with static. Seconds passed. Then, a voice came through. Not distorted, not alien. Elias, Carter, I'm here. Jenna's eyes widened. Holy! Patel's fingers flew over his console. Elias, is that really you? A long silence. Then, I don't know. The word sent a chill through the cabin. Lynn swallowed. Elias, what happened to you? The transmission crackled. I see things differently now. The monolith. It's not just a prison. It's a filter. Jenna frowned. What does that even mean? It doesn't just lock things away. Elias's voice was distant, hollow. It chooses what can leave. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Lynn leaned forward. And what did it choose for you? A pause. Then Elias's final words came through. Something else is waking up. The transmission cut out. Silence. Patel's face paled. Oh, no. Jenna exhaled shakily. I hate this. Lynn turned toward could feel it watching. Waiting. She straightened, forcing her emotions aside. Orpheus, cut the transmission. We're leaving. The ISS Callisto turned away from the monolith. Its engines burned bright as it prepared for a return jump to human space. Patel frowned as he reviewed their data logs. What do we even tell Command? Jenna smirked darkly. That we found the universe's biggest mistake and somehow didn't get ourselves killed? Lynn's voice was cold. We tell them the truth. Jenna raised an eyebrow. And what truth is that? Lynn exhaled. That we locked the door. She turned back to the viewport one last time. But something is still inside. Deep space, uncharted system, the monolith stood alone. Silent once more. A perfect black obelisk against the void. For millennia, it had been nothing but an enigma, an unmoving relic, ignored by time itself. And then, for a brief moment, it spoke. Now, it was quiet again, but something inside had changed. Elias Carter no longer had a body, at least not in the way he once understood. He existed now as something between thought and form, drifting through endless corridors of shifting light. The monolith's interior was infinite, a space without end, a universe contained within a fragment of reality, and in its depths, he was not alone. Shadows moved in the periphery of his vision, shapes that should not exist, fragments of minds long lost. Whispers slithered through the void, not words but memories. The architects, the ones who built the monolith. They had not ascended. They had not evolved. They had been erased. But their prison remained. And within it, something else stirred. A presence older than the monolith, older than the architects. Something that had been waiting since before history itself. You were not meant to inherit. Elias shuddered. He tried to speak, but his voice had no sound here. A vision overtook him. The monolith shattering. The entities, spilling forth unbound, unstoppable. Humanity's last stars winking out one by one. And then, a choice. The monolith was not just a prison, it was a bargain. One must stay. Elias understood. He had closed the door. But the monolith required a keeper. His fate had already been decided, but even as that truth settled over him, something moved in the darkness. Not one of the ancient beings. Something new. Something that had never been here before. A flicker of light. A shift in the void. A single fragmented thought that did not belong to the past. Elias? His breath hitched. That voice. It wasn't one of the entities. It wasn't the monolith. It was Orpheus, the ship's AI. But how? The presence came closer. Formless. Flickering. Yet undeniably there. You are not alone, Orpheus whispered. And for the first time, in the endless black abyss, Elias felt the smallest spark of hope. A new monolith appeared. Somewhere in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, in the dead of space, a second black obelisk materialized. It had never been there before. It pulsed once, and across the vastness of the void, something answered.